Deci and Ryan's motivational army, if you will, all of these researchers all over the world, have identified 3 essential nutriments, they're calling them nutriments, for sustaining motivation. And they're calling them autonomy, relatedness, and competence. And when these 3 psychological nutriments are nurtured in your environment, either by yourself or by others, they are going to stoke the internal fire that is going to sustain you over time as you pursue your goals. So I'm going to give you insight into what we really mean by autonomy, relatedness, and competence, give you some examples of those. As I do it, I would really appreciate it if you would, as you're listening to my examples and definitions, if you would actually be thinking of yourself. So I want you to be selfish here for a little while. I want you to really think about the work you're doing, the activities in your life, and ask yourself, am I doing them with a sense of autonomy, relatedness, and competence? So let's take a look at autonomy. And this is by far the most heavily researched of the 3 nutriments, and probably the most important that we see as human beings. And autonomy is your innate need to feel a sense of control and choice about what you're doing. You will feel autonomous, or when your need for autonomy is met, you're going to feel that you have taken responsibility for your behavior and experience. You feel that you have input in deciding how your goal gets accomplished. You believe your actions are of your own volition. You're acting out of a desire to pursue the goal. You don't feel pressured to do it. And you feel that you're the origin and source of your own behavior. Now, let me just give you a couple of examples of this. I remember talking to a woman who was really bitter because her parents, she actually was supporting putting them into a home for the elderly. And they both had gone into this home kicking and screaming because they wanted to stay in their own home. Well, of course, once they got to the home, what did they want from their daughter? They wanted her to visit them every week. And so she felt that every weekend, every Saturday, she was obliged to go see her elderly parents, and she was to the point where she was feeling like she didn't even want to see them anymore, that she was resentful, as I said, even bitter. And so as she was describing this in a class that I was teaching, somebody said, well, why do you go? And just because, I just really feel obligated to do that for my parents. And they said, well, are there other people in that home who don't have children who come visit them? And she said, of course. And they said, well, then you don't have to visit. It's something you're choosing to do. And she really fought it, and she got angry in the class. Weeks later, I received a card in the mail from her, and she said, Dear Susan, I was so angry when I left your class because I felt I was being judged, and I felt that it wasn't fair because I really was spending a lot of time with my parents, and I didn't feel like they appreciated it. And it wasn't until just recently that I realized what you all were talking about, was that I have the freedom of choice to go or not go. And if I go, that I should acknowledge that it's my decision. She says, once I made that shift, she says, I could go on Saturdays and actually enjoy it. She says, I feel a greater freedom than I've ever felt before. So I would like you to start think about every time you look at your, like, if you have to keep your time logs and you have to have X number of billable hours every week, if you're sitting there saying, oh my gosh, I really have to make 10 cold calls today, or I have to do X number of consulting hours this week, or I have to complete X number of hours for a brief. As soon as you start thinking that those are things you have to do, then you're not feeling autonomous. You're giving up your chance to be motivated by this psychological nutriment of autonomy. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go, but that's the first and probably the foremost psychological nutriment that each one of us needs to have. And the extent you feel autonomous, the more freedom, vitality, and energy you're going to feel. The second nutriment that they have identified is called relatedness. And this is your innate need to connect with and be integrated to and accepted by others, not for attainment of a certain outcome, but for the psychological sense of being with others in secure communion and unity. What we're talking about is mutually satisfying and rewarding relationships. So your need for relatedness is met when you feel an interpersonal or spiritual connection to others in the community of people that are involved in your goal pursuit. You care about them and you feel cared for by them. You feel integral and accepted by them. You do not feel as if you are controlled, obligated, or victimized by anyone involved with the goal, task, or skill. And you feel that you're contributing to something greater than yourself. Now, the reason I have the picture in the bottom right-hand corner there of the man and his little girl is because a dear friend of mine really experienced what I think we mean by relatedness. He was really trying to quit smoking. And he tried everything. And of course, he was feeling not so autonomous because the Surgeon General's warning was on the side of the package. So he was already feeling kind of put upon, and not like he was going to quit because he wanted to, but more because his doctor and the Surgeon General and everybody was telling him to quit smoking. Nothing was working. So one day he's driving along in his car, and he's smoking in his car, and his little girl is sitting in the back seat, 3 years old, sitting in the back seat. And suddenly she yells out at him, "Daddy, will you please quit smoking? You're killing me back here." And all of a sudden, he got it. He got that his smoking was actually hurting someone that he loved dearly. And in that moment of understanding and relatedness, he put out the cigarette and never smoked again. Since I've told this story, I have had so many people come up to me and say, "You know what? That's how I quit smoking." Now, it's different if you're feeling imposed upon by those people. But if you're doing it out of love and mutual caring, then that's what we mean by relatedness. And it is powerful. One of the things that David Facer, my colleague, and David and I both strongly believe that relatedness is one of the least explored and least appreciated aspects of what truly motivates us at work. And I think that to the extent that we oftentimes try to diminish our relationships at work instead of make them more robust and more profound, we're really missing out on an optimal motivator for us. So the third psychological nutriment is called competence. And competence is your innate need to feel effective in your ongoing interactions with your environment. So as we grow, we want to be able to master the world around us. And so to the extent that you have some mastery, to the extent that you feel like you're growing and learning, you're going to feel a sense of competence, and that's going to continue to motivate you. The exciting thing about these psychological nutriments, by the way, is once you've experienced them, you want more of it. Now, it's really different than the way we have typically looked at motivational drives in the past. So if you took, like, early research was saying, we're driven by the need to eat or, to drink, or sex, food, drink, and sex. Eat, drink, and get merry. Those are the three, big drivers. And they are, in fact, motivators for people to take certain actions. But what they are is based on biological needs that end up as psychological drives. And every time you satiate your need, your hunger need, you're hungry, you're motivated to eat, you eat. Guess what? Now you don't need to eat anymore unless you have some kind of tweaked or warped psychological drive and you're then eating for some other reason. So the interesting thing about psychological needs, as we're describing them here, is that unlike the biological needs that once satiated are diminished, psychological needs, once you experience it, you want more of it. And that's what sustains your motivation over time and keeps the fire burning. So your need for competence is met when you feel that the ability and knowledge you have will meet the demands of the challenges you face. When you sense growth and progress in your abilities and knowledge. When you enjoy the challenges your work provides. When you feel challenged yet capable when you are working on your goal. When you feel a sense of confidence and trust in your actions given your level of ability and the demands. And you experience the flow state. And here's what we mean by flow. Remember a time when you were so in the flow of something that you lost track of time, had no distracting thoughts impeding your progress, and no awareness of enjoyment until after the activity had ended, and you noticed your feelings of joy or exhilaration. So do you remember a time like that?